Dr. Connie Zweig, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. We're going to be discussing your book, The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. And I have to say, I love that subtitle, Shifting from Role to Soul, because it pretty much tells the whole story with great economy.
Thank you. It does.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like about your book is that you scatter throughout it quite a bit of your own life experience, your calling, some of the issues and struggles that you've dealt with in your life and overcome and so on. And so how did you come to write this book?
Well, like so many people, as I began to move into my late 60s and contemplate retirement from clinical practice, I really started to feel disoriented. And it surprised me because I'd done so much emotional work and so much contemplative practice. I really had a sense of who I am. And yet I started to ask that timeless question again, who am I?
Yeah.
If I'm not Dr. Connie, the shadow expert, the writer, the therapist, who am I? And so I began to research and read in conscious aging and positive aging literature. And what I found really surprised me. There was no literature from the point of view of the unconscious process, from the point of view of the shadow, which was my expertise.
Right. You've written several books on the shadow.
Yes. And so what is going on? What are the shadows of age? What is going on outside of our awareness that's influencing us? And so when I saw that there was nothing there, I realized I had another book to write.
Oh, boy. At least it gave you some direction and purpose and orientation.
That's right.
That's what this podcast does for me. I might have been, because I have some other careers that have kind of dissolved with time and age. But this podcasting is the thing that I can kind of keep focused on.
That's wonderful. It's a great contribution.
Yeah, it's served that role for me. And one of the things that's interesting about your book is you didn't just draw on your own, rest on your own laurels, but you actually set out to do various forms of research. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Well, I taught a lot of workshops.
Yeah.
And so I met hundreds of people. So I did a lot of interviews with people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Because I wanted to be able to see patterns. You can't just kind of make generalizations without really meeting people and understanding what they're going through. So I saw a lot of patterns, and I saw that many people were experiencing what I came to call late life identity crisis. And then I also interviewed a number of spiritual teachers and Jungian analysts to get their experience of aging, their personal experience, and also what their lineages teach about aging well in those traditions. So there was a lot of research, both, reading and talking and being with people.
Yeah, you talk about a positive aging, and I've conducted several interviews here with Universalist minister Dr. John C. Robinson on elder activism and mysticism. And he's quite active in that arena. And I just wonder if you've run into him at all.
Well, I know him through Saging International.
Okay.
And through some of his books, which are really beautiful, deeply spiritual books.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, they've been... he's been a kind of online buddy, I guess, in a way. One of the things that you write is that old age provides an opportunity to reinvent oneself. So talk about that a bit, if you would.
Well, I don't use reinvent the way that most people do these days. I would rather say reimagine or renew.
Mm-hmm.
Reinvent tends to imply from the outside in, let's change our roles.
Uh-huh.
Let's gear up and do something different.
Right.
And mine is more from the inside out. What's the inner work that will really allow us developmentally to move into another stage of life and become an elder from the inside out? So it's a little bit different orientation and purpose for me. So I'm not so much talking about doing more or doing less, encore careers and volunteering. I'm really talking more about the inner world. What are the internal messages and
Mm-hmm.
promptings that you're receiving but dismissing? What are those messages trying to tell you about this stage of life? How can they guide you? Because we're sort of aging without a map. There's not much guidance in the culture. There's no rite of passage to become an elder. There's no sense of the purpose and meaning of this stage of life. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's unprecedented. I mean, this new longevity has never, ever happened before.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
More years after retirement than any time in history. So part of it is that, and part of it is that we live in this ageist culture that really worships youth.
Right.
Everything young is good and everything old is bad.
And
And
it's hard not to, the ageist culture is out there and we're all subjected to it. And to various degrees, we probably internalize that. I know I catch myself in ways that I kind of internalize that value that youth is good, age is bad.
yeah, independence is good and dependency is bad, or strong is good and weak is bad.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of all of those qualities that go into the ego are youthful, and those qualities that are shamed or devalued go into the shadow and they become unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
But then around midlife and afterwards, we start to meet those qualities. Maybe we get ill. Maybe we slow down or we lose a capacity. Perhaps we lose our flexibility or our eyesight or
Right.
our manual dexterity or a hip breaks or whatever it is. Suddenly, we need help. We go from how can I help you to how can you help me? And it's
Mm-hmm.
full of charge and shame and embarrassment. And that's because we've internalized these messages that the process of aging is pathological rather than natural, and that we should do everything we can to fight it, from surgery to drugs to everything else, to staying overactive. So I'm not discouraging people from remaining active and engaged, but from remaining overactive the way we were at midlife, striving heroically, empire building. This is
Yes.
no longer the time for that. This is the time to self-reflect now and to serve the common good from our experience of self-reflection.
I think too that your book kind of calls to people who aren't as old yet to kind of wake up and smell the coffee that this is coming your way. And how can you develop yourself psychologically, spiritually to be ready to engage with these processes?
Well, my hope is that young people will be interested so that they don't internalize ageism, because that happens through the lifespan. We carry these unconscious fears and images and beliefs that getting old is terrible. And it only means decline. It doesn't mean any of the kind of promising opportunities that we can experience today. So, and then in midlife, if people were to start doing this work, they would have a framework for the lifespan and psychological development in the lifespan and what all the different stages are about. So then they could recognize when it is time to let go. I mean, for example, my husband and I just sold our big house and most of our possessions and moved to a small apartment on the water because it was time for us to let go, to not spend our energy maintaining the material world.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
if you don't have that frame and you don't understand really the purpose of letting go, then, you hang on and try to remain young.
Yeah. Now, what about people who don't have the resources that you and your husband have, to have the privilege of moving to, yes, a small place, but it's on the water and it sounds like it's nature and wonderful.
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is that this is an internal shift, that it's about a state of mind.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about retirement, for instance, and many people can't afford to retire. They can't
Right.
stop paid work now because they don't have the savings. Women weren't paid the same as men. They didn't have the same Social Security, and they can't afford. There's a lot of female poverty in the baby boomer generation. So what I'm suggesting is that this is about an internal state of mind that we can cultivate even as we go to work or go to be with our grandkids or whatever it is we're doing, volunteer at a charity or work for a cause, whatever it is we're doing. It's about the quality of awareness that we bring to it. And so I've spoken to people who are working for financial reasons and are now finding a different framework for it. They realize now they're not isolated like so many people are.
Mm.
So they're becoming more friendly with their workmates. They're building more community and asking for more support there, and they're relating to their purpose at work in a different way with more gratitude. Because as an elder, you have a different awareness of your place in society. There was one woman who said to me, I think she was 68, and she said, I can't keep up with the technology at the workplace. And I told this young man of 20, and I asked him if he would help me. So he's mentoring me in technology, and I'm mentoring him in management. So there are these ways of doing it differently, even when we don't have the means, to live in full comfort.
Yeah, it puts me in mind. I sometimes have to go to Home Depot, to get one or some home maintenance issue dealing with. And there are these guys there who are my age, who are
Right.
working, and and I get from them that, and sometimes I've chatted with them and they've shared some of their stories, and some have enjoyed really quite accomplished lives, and so it's a little surprising. Here's this guy who did all these things in his life, and now here he is at Home Depot. But at the same time, I do get a sense of what you're saying, that that they're able to find some, ideally they're able to find some compensating
Yeah, or a
factors.
lot people are driving Uber. People who need income are driving Uber as well. So what I would say is that this is the teaching about role to soul. We are not what we do. We are not our roles, whether it's CEO or salesperson at Home Depot.
We've heard that for years and years. I've taught that, right?
That's not who we
for
are.
Years and years, and yet where the rubber meets the road, boy, it can be very challenging.
It's very challenging.
Yeah, to make that shift and to not have internalized all of these horrific visions.
Yes, I am what I do. I'm a provider.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a therapist. I'm a writer for me, or I'm a psychologist for you.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean when we are no longer those roles? And, every spiritual tradition across the world teaches us that this stage of life is for spiritual practice. That's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only preparation for death, it's practice to quiet our minds, to deepen our self-awareness, and to connect with something larger than the ego, something transpersonal, a word that you and I share,
Yeah.
something beyond ourselves. And so there are a lot of practices in the book. So I'm not just saying roll to soul as a cute phrase. I'm offering practices, and they're from every tradition, for people to begin to cultivate that deeper identity beyond what they do. And, I borrowed that phrase from the spiritual teacher Ram Dass. I don't want to take credit for it.
Yeah.
Ram Dass coined that phrase. And I remember hearing it many decades ago, and it just stayed with me. So when I was writing the book, it came back. And I picked it up because it says so succinctly what I want to say.
Right.
That's the meaning and purpose of this time of life, to shift our identity to something deeper, something beyond what we do, or what we have, or how we look.
Yeah. One of the things that you write about are messengers. And I suppose one kind of messenger can be dreams. And I think you may have shared a dream or two that served as messengers for you. Is there something around that you can share with us here?
Well, right when I was kind of first beginning to contemplate writing the book, I had a dream about, and this kind of opens chapter 1. I had a dream about a woman from my high school more than 50 years ago who grabbed my purse and ran away with it. And I chased her and I tried to get the purse back, and we ran into this house and she wouldn't give it to me. And I recognized that she was from my past. And so I kind of wondered, why is my past coming to steal my identity? Because my ID was in the wallet in my purse. What is the relationship between my past and my identity now? And eventually in the dream, she opened a drawer and pulled out the purse. And when she handed it to me, I realized it was empty. And for me, symbolically, that meant my identity was not what I thought it was then. And it's not what I think it is now. It's not in a purse. It's just like it's not in my body. My body is like a vehicle, just like the purse is, for my deeper identity. And time and age, in a way, are robbing my body. But they're not robbing my soul. So if I connect with soul, it's here now. It's timeless.
Yeah.
And it's an essential source of identity that is distinct from all the fleeting, changing identities that I've had during my life.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that you emphasize that there are exercises and practices that you speak about in the book. And how might readers make best use of the book?
Well, I think it depends on what messenger is calling. So, for example, retirement is a messenger. And if that's kind of rolling around inside of you, you can look at the practices around retirement. Illness is a messenger. And there's a chapter about how to use illness as a spiritual practice to deepen your identity beyond the body. There are practices to break through denial of mortality. Many people who still can't face that they will die. And that has, changed a bit with the COVID pandemic. I think more people are really feeling vulnerable now.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's still lots of people in denial. And so if we deny that we have a shortened time horizon now in our 50s or 60s, 70s, or 80s, then we're not going to take advantage of the preciousness of this time. We're not going to allow that urgency to change our inner world or what we do in the world. We might say, oh, in fact, this woman said to me this week, I'm 65. I have all the time in the world.
Oh.
I don't have to start writing that book now. I have plenty of time. And so there's, practices for that. There are also general meditation practices for people who are drawn to different traditions. There's some chapters on emotional repair, because many people want to give and receive forgiveness now and really make amends in their relationships. And there's also chapters on completing spiritual unfinished business.
Yes.
So, for example, when do we really re-examine our spiritual beliefs? Do they really fit who we are now? And the images that we have of God or life after death, do those images fit who we are now? I had a client who was practicing Buddhist meditation for years. But when we really kind of started to excavate into his shadow, what we found was he was afraid of going to hell from his early Catholic childhood. And so some of that is important to examine now as we move toward the end of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And life completion, what does it mean really to complete our lives? Is there something that only you can give to society that you really want to do, that you want to leave as a legacy? Or something you need to say to your family? A lot of people are making video memoirs now for their families. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are many different kinds of practices in the book.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you do your best to provide a lot of leeway so that people don't feel boxed into a particular
Right.
Dogma or religious dogma.
Right. I really tried to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the book is full of wisdom that people can tap into and be inspired by to find their way into this internal journey that you're talking about. And so,
I also might add, Dave, if I might.
Yeah.
It's a really useful book for therapists because we get so little training in working with older people. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had none. And there are very few geriatricians, and, the gynecologists are not focused on the gerontologists are not focused on psychology. And so, it's a guide for anyone, for senior advisors, for nurses, for gerontologists, people who are working with older folks who want to continue their development, who want to do emotional work. Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I'm having some interaction with the medical system, and there are, and our medical system is really in disarray right now, I have to say. And so that often there's a sense of, not much sense of caring. Rather, you're in a system and you're being moved through, and the doctors and caretakers are way overloaded. And so they don't have that much space to give.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really sad. My husband was saying the same thing yesterday. He can't get through to see a doctor he really needs. Yeah, it's really challenging right now.
Yes, it is. It is. So I think I know you've got some other things to do here, so I want to let you go, but I don't want to cut you off. So if there's more that you'd like to say before we ring off here, this is your opportunity.
Thank you. I just want to invite people to take this journey with me. It's really radically changed my experience of my late 60s and early 70s. And it's really woken me up to the possibilities of this time of life. And I think that we need a rite of passage to move from senior to elder. You know, we all become seniors with our Medicare birthday. But how do we become an elder? Indigenous cultures teach that, but our Western post-industrial society doesn't acknowledge that in any way. So the book is a kind of a rite of passage. And if you kind of walk through it with intention at your own pace, choose what you like, leave what you don't like, you know, I think you'll really find some rewards. There's also life review, how to do a life review, which was just a profound experience for me. I didn't expect it to be at all. I was surprised by it. And
what was involved in the life review?
well, the traditional life review is sort of looking at the ego's journey, you know, in conscious awareness. So I added the dimension of the shadow. What's the unlived life review? How do we connect what was expressed with what was repressed in our lives?
Okay.
And as we begin to uncover what was repressed or unlived, what do we want to reclaim now? And so I've been talking to people who've started painting, started learning musical instruments, started different kinds of volunteer activities, when they kind of recognized that there was a part of them that they had left behind, a dream or a talent that had gotten buried in the empire building stage, and that they had really left behind and they were forgetting about until they recognized, wow, I actually have the time now and I have the ability, you know, I have the health and I can do that now. A friend of mine said that he's waited to write his novel for like 50 years and he's doing it now.
Good for him.
So, yeah. So
I recently lost one of my best friends to Alzheimer's, and and it really is a loss because he was so important to me, what he represented and all. But his core personality of sweetness and joy and concern for others remained intact. So,
I had the same experience with my father. Same experience, and I write about it in the book. I write about caregiving my dad with Alzheimer's and who he had been and who he became.
Yeah.
It's a whole world that has just, you know, a lot of grief in it. A lot of really, really deep sorrow and grief for people who know someone with that disease.
Yeah.
And there's no solution right now. There's no quick fix.
Right.
Yeah. And at the same time, if we can kind of step back and really practice seeing people as souls on a journey. And I did that with my dad. You know, sometimes I couldn't maintain it, you know, and I'd get hurt or angry, or he'd get hurt or angry. But a lot of the time I could see that he was a soul on a journey, and not the personality he was when I was a kid, not the personality he was in the wheelchair. And I had the same experience with my best friend who had cancer and eventually died while I was writing the book. And we just kept allowing ourselves to become more and more transparent with each other until all the roles fell away and we really like saw through all the masks. And the love was for the soul, you know, it was soul to soul.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's a way, and it doesn't deny the feelings, you know, the feelings. I think of her every day. It doesn't deny the feelings of loss and sorrow, but it also connected me to something greater.
So the real opportunities, even in these last moments, in these sort of dire straits for growth and love and deep feeling
and self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
So even like being a caregiver, which can be very taxing, but there are opportunities there.
Exactly.
If one can
Exactly.
orient it. Yeah.
So I needed to keep doing my shadow work because I was getting overloaded and angry, and, she wouldn't listen to me, or frustrated or whatever. And I needed to keep doing my inner work. And she did that as long as she could. There was a point, where so much chemo, she couldn't do it anymore. But there was a connection there between us that transcended all that. And that's one of the promises of spiritual work.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Connie Zweig, I want to thank you for writing this book and making this source of comfort available to us all. And I want to thank you for being my guest today on Shrink Wrap Radio.